Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are joining you live for our first Canon Conversations to discuss the important topic of fourth wave womanism. As you may know, my name is Reverend Dr. Melanie Jones Quarles, and I am the director of the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership. The Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership at Union Presbyterian Seminary recognizes the significance of centering Black women's scholarship as viable sources and resources for theological education. This series, entitled Canon Conversations, is a new series launched by the Center that is aimed to promote all things womanist wisdom as we support and encourage new titles, authors, and womanist ideas. Fourth wave womanism, what does it mean? Since Alice Walker's In Search of Our Mother's Gardens womanist prose more now than 40 years ago, womanism continues to make moves and chart meaning-making paths for Black women in their quest to dismantle oppression and thrive regardless. Black women in and outside the academy have embraced and critiqued Walker's four-part definition. Tonight's webinar explores an emerging fourth womanist wave that responds to the contemporary challenges Black women face to define themselves for themselves. I am welcome tonight with our moderator, who is Daphne Hill. She is joining us as a final level seminarian at Union Presbyterian Seminary, who will receive her Master of Divinity degree and her Master of Arts in Christian Education degree in May 2024. As part of her work at the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership, Daphne is the architect of the Katie Geneva Cannon Center for Womanist Leadership Library, which hosts and houses the books donated to the center by the estates of Dr. Cannon. Daphne is also a fellow for the seminary's Center for Excellence in Christian Education, serving the Richmond campus, and she works as the seminary's William Smith Morton Library. Daphne has served as a student representative on the Board of Trustees for the seminary and as a student representative on the assessment team that reports up to the Board of Trustees. She is a member of the St. Paul's Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia for over 15 years, and she was the inaugural on-camera announcer under the media team. She has served on the counting team, women's small group, and a member of the St. Paul's Toastmasters Club. She is currently serving as a group leader for the Encore Life stage and has served as the Voice newsletter team, served on the Voice newsletter team at Rising Mount Zion Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia for over a decade. She is a graduate of the University of Virginia with a BA in sociology and holds master's degrees in social work from Norfolk State University and business administration. She's a certified life coach and is the owner of a Virginia SWAM certified training development company entitled Communicate to Elevate. Welcome, Daphne. Our special and featured guest is none other than Ebony Janice, who is a womanist, a scholar, an activist, a professor, a student, a content creator, a Black girl becoming. Ebony Janice is the founder and CEO of the Free People Project and the Ebony Janice Project. Her spiritual mentorship program, entitled Dream Yourself Free, is designed to help Black women heal intergenerational wounds and prioritize pleasure. Her talks embody a hip-hop womanist perspective. She is the visionary and creator of Black Girl Mixtape, a platform and safe think space that centers the intellectual authority of Black women. She's financially supported high school girls in Kenya by building 2 classrooms and a dormitory, upgrading the school's technology, and creating a curriculum for girls' leadership. She earned her bachelor's in cultural anthropology and political science and a master's of arts in social change with a concentration in spiritual leadership, womanist theology, and racial justice. She is the author of the book, All the Black Girls Are Activists. She enjoys theater, playing viola, and practicing her French. When she isn't preaching, reaching, and teaching, she is ordering croissants in coffee shops around the world, reading romance novels, giggling with her girlfriends, journaling, and dissecting Beyonce lyrics. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Listen, I'm actually going to get out the way and move to the side because our moderator for tonight is Daphne. When we thought of this conversation coming out of Dr. Cannon being a lover of books, a lover of knowledge, we thought, why don't we make space to center Black women's texts, our stories, to center our voices, and to center particularly new titles? And the first book that came to mind that Daphne reminded me to go take a look at and to read was All the Black Girls Are Activists. So that brings us to this place today. And we thought we both hop on to chat with you and also to learn from you tonight. For those of you who are joining us online, drop a note and let us know that you are joining us. I see folks from Chicago, from Atlanta, from New York. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Daphne?
Thank you, Dr. Jones Quarles. Um, I'm really excited about tonight, so hopefully I can keep myself contained. So I want to start off with you, Ebony Janice, starting with your title. How do you define womanism? How do you understand this emerging fourth wave? And how is pursuing dreams radical resistance?
Thank you. Thank you for those questions and thank you for having me. And also, because of my short attention span, you're probably going to have to repeat part of that question in a second. But the first part, my understanding of womanism, or the way that I'm defining womanism, I don't even necessarily know that it's profound. It's an amalgamation. It's, in relationship with what the elders and the scholars before me have been thinking about womanism for some time. Of course, my introduction, through the definition of Alice Walker's definition of womanism, I usually linger in two parts of that definition. Womanism is the feminism as purple is to lavender, because I understand myself as a Black feminist, specifically deciding to call myself a womanist. But that womanism is the feminism as purple is to lavender, to me, is womanism is Black women's deeper shade of purple, is Black women's deeper feminist work. And so the spirit, the soul, all of that, I think is what makes Black women's feminism, specifically those of us that identify as womanists, what makes our feminism the deeper shade of purple. The other part of that definition that I linger in is, Mom, I'm going to Canada and I'm taking you and several other slaves with me. And the mother replies to the daughter, it wouldn't be the first time, because there's just this beautiful intergenerational exchange that happens there. And I believe that's a major part of how I'm defining womanism. Seeing myself in conversation with the elders, I think I'm saying something profound. Sometimes they look at me and say, that's brilliant. Sometimes they look at me and say, baby, you wouldn't be the first. We've been doing that. We've been thinking about that. And so, leading into how I'm understanding fourth wave womanism, the way that I define womanism in the book specifically is a spiritual, religious, and a socio-political tool that Black women are using for our movement making and also for seeing ourselves as whole. And that fourth wave of womanism, again, I think it can be audacious depending on who you're asking, to say that this is another wave of womanism. But I also feel like the way that I am identifying certain behaviors and certain ways that we're showing up in our womanism in this current moment is a moving forward, is a wave. What um, we're understanding, as a is it it's not there's not an end to it. Womanism will continue to evolve and to grow. And so this fourth wave of womanism, I think that, the elders in many ways are probably looking at that statement and saying, some are saying that's beautiful, and some are saying, oh baby, we've been thinking about that for some time now, so you wouldn't be the first. So that's my long-winded introduction to womanism.
And the and how is it pursuing dreams There's radical resistance.
Yeah, I see pursuing our dreaming as radical resistance because of the revelation that so many of us have been creating our lives from. What I mean by that is Fannie Lou Hamer, sick and tired of being sick and tired. And when you are a people that are sick and tired of being sick and tired, so much of what you create, so much of what you do, so much of what you imagine is from through the filter of that exhaustion. So many of us don't even know what our actual wildest dream is. And, to bring in the beloved, Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon into this conversation, many of us haven't even really explored what actually is the work our soul must have, because we've been doing so much filtering through white supremacist delusion and filtering through, the exhaustion that comes as a result of that. So dreaming is radical and revolutionary because if people who have not historically been able to dream start intentionally dreaming, then that is resistance. That is saying, I'm not going to keep just doing this thing that I have been doing historically, even though I understand why me and my family and my elders and ancestors have shown up that way. But the intentionality around, okay, I want to actually figure out what does it look like for me to potentially dream myself into the future, to dream me and my people, to dream this conversation into the future, as not through this, again, this lens of white supremacist delusion and the exhaustion that we feel as a result of that.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. I'm going to come back to a few things in a moment. I want to speak now quickly over with Dr. Jones Quarles. How would you identify the connections between your coining the term millennial womanist and fourth wave womanism?
That's a great question because backstory, Ebony, Janice, and I, we met through millennial womanism in terms of you were, what was that? Maybe like 2017, 2018. So that's a while back, 6 or 7 years back. One of our kind of feature millennial womanists to watch back then. And I think this is in line, with the same kind of energy in terms of understanding that, again, womanism is this prophetic social movement, right? That is concerned about dismantling these systems of oppression. And in doing so, there have been particular ways by which we want to get at these questions across generations. And in many ways, there's been talk about how do we really define first, second, third, right? And now fourth, or this emerging fourth. And I think, Ebony, Janice, I just want to celebrate first off the book and that it is out and that it is on shelves. I saw it, a snippet posted in Essence magazine. I was like, yes, get it. Because it is taking this conversation that is often, particularly womanism, that has often been esoteric, that has been confined to the halls of the academy or to folks who have not just pursuing their undergrad degrees, but mainly pursuing their master's or advanced degrees, and important conversations that need to be had and rehad in your living room, at the kitchen sink, right? In these conversations with Black women in the beauty shop and the hair shop, all these things are not being had because we don't have accessible materials, as many as we should. So how I read the book and read your kind of nod to fourth wave womanism is both this sense of womanism making it accessible to populations, both within and outside the academy. We look to our elders as voices, as theorists, as folks who have given us the kind of language to begin the conversation. And I'm so happy to see ways in which folks today are imagining that conversation in ways it moves into praxis. So like you talk about, the NAP ministry, right? You talk about Black Girl Owned. You talk about dreaming and resistance. You talk about things that aren't necessarily, we wouldn't think, oh, is that a big deal? But it is a big deal for Black women to rest. It is revolutionary for us to practice dreaming. It is, significant, right? For us to be able to, in many ways, just have a space to create and to develop ourselves. and making paths to do that. Whether folks identify with like womanist, this is the womanist space, or they're bringing it into praxis based upon the tenets and how they activate and embody those tenets. So I think there's some definite resonance and connections, and I think this is all about the continuing movement that the womanist movement, I think, is continuing to birth in us all.
Thank you. Because when I was reading the book and I'm like, fourth wave, and I was like, "Ah, this reminds me of Reverend Melanie. She's a millennial womanist." And so thank you for helping me to kind of pull those pieces together, because it just resonated with me. The millennial womanist, and then this fourth wave. And so I saw your hand pop up,
Yeah,
Ebony.
I also want to say too that just to note that I am millennial. So this is, of course, how Dr. Me and Rev were introduced originally. I am a millennial, and the majority of the people that I am bringing into this conversation are also from this same generation. And I think that and I also acknowledge that in third wave womanists were kind of asking the question whether or not you had to be Black and female or Black and a woman in order to be considered a womanist. And while, Dr. Monica Coleman doesn't her in her assessment at that point of the publishing of that book, she didn't believe that you had to be in this conversation. I am saying that you don't have to be a womanist. You don't have to call yourself a womanist to do womanist work, right? To center Black women's wholeness, to be thinking about Black women's wellness. And you also don't, even though I cited basically the homies, who were doing this work, because I've been observing this thing happening in my, with my cohort and with, those people that I've been in intimate relationship with. But the beautiful thing is, and Dr. Session is in this, in the quote over here, there is a Facebook group with a lot of womanists who were certainly not millennials, who were reading the text simultaneously. And it was possibly one of the highest affirmations of my life to see these people who have, many of them likely been in relationship with the conversation around womanism longer than I have, who were saying, okay, I see myself here as well. So I love that from so many different places, right? Uh, we've been thinking about this. And again, it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. Even the spirit deserves citation. So sometimes we show up to a conversation and we think we're saying something profound. And then we get together, and Chicago's in the building, and California's in the building, and Dallas is in the building. And somebody says, we were doing those same Black girl hand games. How we were singing those same songs, we were playing those, right? Like we were saying the same thing. So it takes, I think it's very beautiful when we do have the opportunity to have these conversations from several different places and realize, like, oh wow, there's something in the spirit that was urging us all to this moment, for sure.
And I'm not a millennial. And the book resonated with me. I see it really as a great introduction for many of us who have not been a part of the academy and who do not necessarily understand, what womanism is about. I thought it was a really good introduction. But I'm going to get back on task because my professor is on the line, my advisor. Ebony Janice, can you share with us why you dedicated your book to your cousin? She reminds me of some of my family and friends. Could you tell us why you dedicated your book to your cousin, and what was her response when she
Yeah.
saw that you dedicated the book to her?
My cousin Latricia Gowdy is who the book is dedicated to. And actually, Latricia was murdered several years ago. Um, and so she, as an ancestor, I'm certain, is just tickled. I'm certainly using my spiritual imagination and, in my prayer time leading up to this moment, thinking about her, knowing that she would just be so tickled. In fact, I talk about how she would just be like, praise God about everything, every single thing. You could be like, Latricia, I bought you a gallon of sweet tea. Praise God, So I know that she would just be so tickled. I dedicated this book to my cousin Latricia Gowdy because genuinely she really is the first, when I really look back over my life, the first free girl I ever knew. She was just in process out loud. And whatever judgment I had of that as a young girl, as this evolving version of myself as an adult woman becoming, I see Latricia's processing, and her loud voice and her, being very sad out loud and experiencing depression and naming it that in the 1980s. It's like I see Latricia as possibly one of the most free people that I had ever met. And so it felt like an honor, certainly for me and for, my family, to name her in this way so that she gets to continue living on. So I know Latricia's wherever she is in the eternal. Praise God.
Thank you. Thank you. I did not realize that, but it just
It's
reminded
not in the
me.
book anywhere. Yeah, nobody knew. It's not in the book that
Okay,
she doesn't. Yeah, she's not in this form.
right. But I will say that I think we all know a Latricia Gowdy,
I hope
right?
so.
And I also felt I connected with you in that space as well, kind of like where you were coming from. So that was awesome. But now we talked about her loudness, but I want to
Mhm.
flip to the softness, right? The softness that you refer to in your book, it just sounds really beautiful.
Mhm.
Can you talk to us a little bit about softness? Like, what is it? What it means to you? And I was like, is that even possible? But then again, I'm of a different generation. But I was like, is that even possible? So,
Yeah.
could you speak
Well,
to that,
so
please?
I really will, to be as brief as possible, because I could actually write just a whole book about the pursuit of softness, honestly, because I have been such a thug all my life. To quote the great Andre 3000, before he just became focused on his flute, keep your heart, three stacks, keep your heart, these girls are smart, play your part. Like, I really was kind of walking around like a thug. And I observed that of myself and, my sisters and the rest of you, that we were so invested. And again, this is not profound. Dr. Shanika Walker Barnes wrote a whole book about, the case for a strong Black woman, right? The strong Black woman versus a Black woman that happens to be strong. And I don't think many of us ever really thought about that. We have been in such a relationship with our strength and with our mother's strength and with our elder's strength. That's the way that we would enter the conversation. Our mama was a strong Black woman, right? Like, that's how we would start. And so I actually was in a relationship, a beautiful relationship, beautiful love relationship with a man who um, was very crystal clear, very sovereign, very clear about himself. And I remember one weekend, I don't think I've ever told the story publicly. He hurt my feelings got hurt. I won't say he hurt my feelings. My feelings got hurt. And I was just making a little bit of money at the time. So I said to myself, I don't have to put up with this. My man got two jobs. Me is my man with my two jobs. So I bought a plane ticket. And before he got back home from work, I was on my way back to my home out of town. And so, but he got home before I got on the plane. And he's like, what happened? And I'm telling him how I'm feeling. And we had this very beautiful conversation, but I still had to be a thug. So I still went home. So we didn't talk for a couple days. A couple days later, he calls me. Such a beautiful conversation. It tickles me to think about it. He calls me and he says, you deleted my number from your phone, didn't you? And I said, yes. And he said, can you please stop doing that? It hurts me when you do that. And I was just like stunned. I was like, I'm gonna lose him. I don't know how to be in a relationship where somebody wants me to be vulnerable and it's a safe place for me to do that. And so the more I started to just kind of explore that for myself personally, I realized that I wanted a chance to be soft. I wanted to not have to be so afraid of protecting myself in all situations, particularly in romantic relationships. But the more I began to explore softness inside that relationship, the more I realized that in all the places that I exist, I want to know what that feels like. And so my definition of softness is really thinking about regulating the nervous system. What does it feel like for me to not always be like this and to get to be in my seat, which I call in the book the seat of Toni. Toni Morrison is like the softness archetype for me, where I think Toni Morrison can say really hard things, really like really hard conversations, but fully seated. And what does that feel like for me to be able to say, I don't like how this feels, but from my seat, which is a very different place from when I say, I don't like how this feels. What that feels like, even though that's true, what that feels like in my body is a disruption. So this regulating of my nervous system and this figuring out how to live from that place where I can still be honest, I can still say the truth, I can still say really hard things, I can still talk about this very, all of these heavy things that are going on around us on a daily basis, but I do it from my seat, and I'm creating tools to where I get to stay in the seat of Tony versus getting up out of my seat to go have to deal with all the things. And it's also inviting the rest of us into that, right? What does it look like for us to co-create safe space where Black women and femmes get to be soft, where our vulnerability is not used against us, and where we don't use other people's vulnerability against them, where I could say, in any given situation, I'm actually really hurting by that, and I don't have to try to pretend like I'm good, or nothing's wrong with me. I'm experiencing some pain. I'm experiencing, some discomfort. I don't like what this feels like, or whatever that expression is. And to not have to harden ourselves. So yeah, that softness really has been while it started as this kind of romantic pursuit, it's been in every area of my life now. Like, what does softness look like for me in every single situation? Because the world is not gonna stop, trying to bombard me. And I can't keep showing up like this every single day. I am tired of that. It doesn't feel good. And I'm interested in what's happening to my body, what's happening to my spirit, what's happening to, I can't even imagine. I can't even dream. I can't even be sweet. I can't even experience the full power of the Holy Ghost because I'm so busy like this, trying to protect myself. I just want a chance to be soft.
I feel that. I really do. Maybe it is because I happen to be from the concrete jungle. I
Mm.
don't know, but I really feel that, and that's when I was like, is that even possible? So I will work. I will work on that. Um, Now this one is for the two of you, for both of you. I'd like to hear from both of you about imposter syndrome. Why do you think it rears its head in relation to Black women? And what do you do or suggest to those of us who experience it when it comes? Either Reverend Melanie. I know, Dr. Jones Quarles. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Would you? Can you go, please? Can you respond to that for me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Evan, you started out in the book talking about imposter syndrome and the kind of, especially being in a place. I think it was some conversation that you were on with, I believe, Michelangelo, or I can't remember exactly who, but you
Mm.
were saying, sitting in that moment, you were wrestling with, oh, okay, wait, I'm with this person, I'm with that person. Should I be here? Do I belong? And so this kind of uh, real challenge about finding one's place and finding one's belonging, I think is pressing. I mean, that's a life challenge, right, for all people, but particularly in Black women. For Black women, when we've been said and ostracized and said that we don't belong in these spaces, right, that they are already hostile, right, they are already filled with these kinds of notions that you are not, presumed incompetent, that you're not able to produce, that you don't have what it takes. So this furthers that, and this, of course, is what oppression does. It seeks to divide and
Mhm.
isolate, right? It seeks to keep us from understanding our value and worth. But it's also this sense of not allowing folks, even folks that we might look like us, or folks that we should be connected to or find strength from, not placing us in spaces and places where we can actually draw from that strength.
Mhm.
And I think we need to just recognize that as a part of these systemic, systems that are at work. But I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I'm looking for this Nipsey Hussle quote that just came to my mind from this lyric. But in the meantime, I I want to say that yes to all of the above, everything that you just said. Um, And from a different direction, I also think that part of the reason why so many of us experience imposter syndrome is because we actually have genius level capacity, but there's nobody saying that what you're saying and doing is actually genius. So you experience it as imposter syndrome because you think that you need to do something more. You think that you need to prove something more. You're looking around you and other people might not be doing it as easeful as it is for you to do it. And so you think you need to put some more struggle into it. And so you start to feel like, well, maybe I need to add a couple more degrees or some more certifications, or obviously there's white supremacy, right, is the answer to this question. But the other ways in which, like, we think through, oh, am I actually credible? Am I actually, do what more could I do to prove that I'm really worthy of being in this space? And haven't had any time to really let it resonate that a good portion of what it is that you're doing and bringing to certain conversations is really genius level. And the Nipsey lyric that I'm thinking about, he says something, it's the song Motivation. No, he a genius, he just can't claim it because they left him no platform to explain it. There's no way to really, there's no one has ever told you that. And then even if somebody told you that, there's nobody, there's no platform, there's no entity that's really, cultivating the genius level reality in which you show up. And I'll give an example of this. I don't really be liking to tell people this because I feel like I be doing stuff the day before it's due. Like, my mind wants to do it 2 months ago when I knew there was a deadline coming up, but I cannot. And then the day before it's due, I will build the whole curriculum, and I will be past tense. Ebony Janice used to be like, this is not going to be good. And then I will show up and everybody will be like, this is amazing. And I'll be like, I did this last night. And what helped me to get over judging myself for that is acknowledging that that is me tapping into my genius. That is my genius zone. I'm not going to keep stressing myself out the 2 months that me personally, I'm not trying to recommend this to other people. If you got a process, stick with your process. But for me, my genius zone is that I can see the outline and then execute in 24 hours. Like, it's not the most thrilling thing, but it happens for me. It's the way I show up. And so what other ways in which we have genius level capacity, but nobody has ever said, do you realize that that is actually brilliant, that you can do that? Or do you realize that that's actually genius level capacity that you show up in when you show up in that way? And so, because no one has ever said that, again, that Nipsey lyric, that they left on no platform to explain it, because no one has ever told you, because there's no platform to explain that or to express that, you think something's wrong with you instead of, this is my genius zone. And so now I really just lean into that. I'll do my due diligence to make sure that I have an outline in place, and that I have if y'all knew how I wrote All the Black Girls Are Activists, honestly, every single deadline, I was sitting right there like, can y'all give me a minute? No, ma'am, turn these pages in. But spirit, just moved in this genius level zone. So I do think that there is, all of the systematic things that, of course, tries to teach us that we are not worthy or credible, or what else is more credible than us, and also genius, and you don't know that that's what is happening for you.
I just think that's so powerful. I see the chat just blowing up. People like, yes, period. But part of the systems will say, that process that you rightly name as your genius, right, is allowing those systems that say, oh no, that's procrastination. Although that it's not good enough because it's the night before. Oh no, you should have worked. Right. No, these are the things that help me become who I am and help me operate in my full self. We have to deny all of these systems that want to label, right, and put negative connotations on what it means to be and becoming, that often keep us from really finding that genius that's within us. So I love it. I love it. I love
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, thank you because I've been operating in Genius for all 4 years in seminary. I just didn't know it.
Again, I would like to say to the saints of God here, if that is not your actual genius zone, don't be like Ebony Janice said. Okay, but if the fact is we all just think differently,
Mhm,
and we
mhm,
process differently, and exactly what you just said is how we have allowed those, the story about what that means. That's lazy. You're not really credible. You needed to toil and snare in order for it to be good enough. And for many of us, that's just not the case. There are ways in which we show up and it's like, oh, that's just my thing. I know what I know. Like, why am I going to
mhm,
in fact, maybe I've already put in my 10,000 hours in that reality. So I'm not going to try to do something extra when I've embodied this reality. I can just show up in this reality, and I don't need to, for me in this particular, instance, I don't need to, it doesn't take me 2 months to do that. I can, oh, I know what I'm going to say. I'm living this. So let me, just let it pour out of me now.
mhm, mhm.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I know we're it's the time is just running by. Oh my goodness. So, but I do want to get there's one of my favorite chapters is In Pursuit of My Name.
Mhm.
And so I want to know what made you write that chapter and what do you want the reader to take away from it in pursuit of my name?
So I was thinking about what are these things that we're like fourth wave womanism, in my estimation, is really these simple ideas that, because we've been doing such heavy lifting for so many years, we haven't had the time or the space to really sit down with the things that feel very simple if we think about it. And I thought, my name is, which is such attention for people, Mary Agnes, Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen, all of these people, they can get their double names, but a Black girl with two names is just a struggle for many people. And so, because that is my own lived experience, I constantly, I have historically, I will stop you. I don't care what we're doing. You could be the president of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, and I will still say, actually, you said my name wrong. My name is actually Ebony Janice. And I will do it every single time. And if I tell you and then you still do what you want to do, I'll stop you again. And that for me has historically felt very much so like my resistance, because I refuse to let somebody just call me whatever it is they want to call me. In fact, Alice Walker, in talking more about womanism, even says that at the very least we should be able to name ourselves. And so that's it for me. At the very least, I'm coming into the situation. I can't be in charge of all the things that are going to happen here, but the very minimal, the very least tiniest thing that I can receive that will make sure that I am free in this space is my name, right? And so thinking about it that way, I know that I am not the only person who has been called something that is not how they actually identify. And so what does it look like for us to create an ethic in which we say, this is actually how I understand myself, my name, but whatever it is, right? This is how I understand myself. And we can't move forward in this conversation, in this relationship, in this experience, if at the very least you cannot see me, or acknowledge me in that.
Thank you. Because I so resonate with that. I'm like, my name does not rhyme with Stephanie. It's two syllables. It's
Funny.
one A, one E, no I, no Y, 6 letters. Thank you.
Hmm.
So when I read, I was like, yes. Because, people are like, well, that's not the big deal. Yes, it is a big deal. My mama named me Daphne.
It is. I
And
say
I'm
this
not
in the book
Greek.
too. This
I'm
is
not Greek, but that's my name.
one of my favorite parts of that chapter actually is the thinking about what is the book? I've lost the book in my mind, but there's this book that came out several years ago. I think about it, by Yagasi, Homegoing, where there's this character named H, and he calls his girlfriend Eth the wrong name, and then he ends up going to jail for like 10 years. They don't see each other again 10 years later.
Mm.
And when they reconnect, Eth is like, I'm reading this book like sobbing, because Eth is like, at the I don't have nothing else. I can't, now I'm with you and I can't even have my name. It's like, I know that naming is, it's not just Ebony Janice making it a big deal about my name. And in fact, for other people who may not have, a name, may have a name that feels very common, or, that people don't struggle with, there are other ways in which naming impacts you. And maybe, and I'm hopeful that, as a reader, that chapter gives you the opportunity to think about that as well. Like, what in the naming has been taken from you or put on you that you didn't ask for, and or maybe an opportunity to say, actually, I think that I do want to be more particular about what I let people call me.
Thank you. Thank you. We have opened up the chat. Well, we've asked in the chat if you have a question directly for Ebony Janice to please let us know, and we will try to monitor the chat as I move on to another question that I have for you. Um, in pursuit of ancestors, please discuss this very important and deeply personal work as an act of healing and resistance.
Well, I saw pursuing my ancestors as resistance because I grew up in the Black church, um, as a Christian woman, and ancestors, while I can look back and recognize that there were altars and, ways that we were in relationship with our ancestors, even if that's not what we were calling it, my whole life, that to start talking about ancestors and using that language is, that's demonic. You can't be talking about no ancestors. You can't, venerating ancestors is certainly not a practice that I grew up with. And in fact, most of my 99% of my family is still decidedly, Christian, and struggles with this language, right? Talking about ancestors or thinking about ancestors in such a way, it feels too much like worship. It feels too much, right? They just don't have a full understanding of it. But I realized that so many, not just millennial womanists, right, but my age mates, right? So many of my contemporaries, my age mates, have been in pursuit of our ancestors, been thinking about ancestors in a way that our upbringing as, Black Christian girls, didn't give us space to do so. And so both the actual pursuit of and naming it as that is what's happening for me feels very radical and revolutionary. Because again, my understanding of revolutionary and the way that I'm defining in the book is, if we have not been able to do something and then we actively begin to do that, what does that is resistance, and that is revolutionary. But additionally, it's very profound because I'm talking about dreams as radical resistance, and I don't see it possible to talk about the future, where we're going in the future, without thinking about and being in conversation with, the elders and the ancestors, that they have so much information, even still, even my ancestors still, have so much powerful information for me, whether I'm using my radical spiritual imagination, or whether I'm just tapping into my memory of something that my grandmother said, and or passed down, right? There's just so much profound there. And so I am understanding and believing that we will not be able to be the fullest, most free version of ourselves without, pursuing our ancestors and bringing them wholly into this present and into the future.
Thank you. So
I just
I was
want to
going to say,
ask.
Rev, I want to
Yeah.
ask you if
Oh,
you don't
you got
mind.
a question. Well, I
Oh,
just
yeah.
want to add to that. I think that's so profound, because I think one of the challenges when folks see like an emerging fourth wave or like a new way, they're like, oh, we're going to forget everything that has been in the past. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's exactly not it. You missed it.
Uh-huh.
Right. This is really grounding ourselves, right, within that both ancestral presence, but also what so many have done behind and before in order to push us forward to ask questions that are meaningful for this time. And so I think that's just so profound in terms of just honoring and recognizing that the ancestors are still a part of this ongoing and futuristic work as well.
And some of this we just get to say out loud. They couldn't, you
Mhm,
know.
mhm.
Again, you going to Canada. I'm taking you and several other slaves with me. It wouldn't
Right,
be the first time.
right.
They were in fleshing and living and just couldn't talk about it where they were. And
Right.
that is a part of what I think, is this fourth wave of womanism is we have the platform and also just living out the what they, revealed to us. And so yeah, just I don't even want to be arrogant enough to suggest that I am the first person to think this, but certainly I'm not suggesting that, right? But certainly, we just have the space to say some things that they just could not say.
Absolutely.
And so, Doc, what I was going to ask you was, what were your thoughts on the pursuit of ancestors in relation to womanist theology?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, we need this. One of the things that I think, and I think it's some questions that are popping up, so I want to make sure we get to those. But
Mhm.
this conversation you have very early, not actually in pursuit of my ancestors, but I'm a show out where you show out, honey. And learning that from your mother, and it just resonated with me in so many ways. And I'm like, those are stories that my aunties, my mom and them was like, no, you show out in this store, I'm gonna show out right with you. And that is an ethic of practice, right? That is a
Mhm.
womanist ethic of practice. Like, I will show out. I will call you out on this thing. I will tell you my name, even though you act like you don't hear it, right? I will continue to do this in living color before
Mhm.
you start denying and explaining away, acting like it did not exist, right? All these things.
Mhm.
That is where learning from folks who have come before us, who have taught us, who we resonate with, pushes us to take new steps into the future.
Mhm.
And that is, not only is it theological, I think, but it's also deeply womanist, deeply ancestral.
Mhm. 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 I wanted to grab this question. Um, Given this discussion on the importance of identity, do you feel like fourth wave womanism will do the important work of being more intentionally inclusive of Black trans women? Absolutely. Um, I did. Attempted to be very intentional in the introduction of this book about who I was talking to. My When I say all the Black girls are activists, I am using the language Black girl as my actual socio-political like location. It's like a location for me. I live at Black girlhood, it's a part of my language, it's a part of the way that I exist in my body, it's my, all of that. And so I wanted to be clear about who I was talking to, and asked many of my, Black trans girlfriends if they feel like I made that mark, if it was clear that that's who I was talking to. And they, all the ones that I spoke to, I hate it when people do that because I don't want to be like, I talked to all the Black trans girls in the world. My Black trans girlfriends told me that I did a good job saying that I was talking about them too. But definitely, I believe that fourth wave womanism specifically is definitely thinking about, and intending to be as inclusive as possible, around what this conversation looks like. As a matter of fact, we have a project coming up, um, a major project coming up in the next few months that will launch in February, which I know that you all will be thrilled about. So I'll share more specifically soon. But there are Black trans revolutionaries that are a part of it, and it isn't all the Black girls are, project. Because it feels impossible to be talking about Black girlhood without including all of the various ways that we experience Black girlhood.
Thank you. I don't see another question in chat, so I have one more question. Well, actually, it's gonna come to each of you separately. But Ebony Janice, do you see activism, tenets of womanism, and cries for liberation in everything? Like, was there a defining moment or a particular period in your life when you realized that all the Black girls are activists? And can
Mhm.
you speak to that?
Yeah, certainly was raised to be a little tiny tot for justice. And I think that my upbringing is unique in certain ways. Um, and at the same time, not at all. I grew up in a Southern Black Christian experience, Baptist, and but my pastor was really amazing in that, in the 80s and the 90s, he used to let me be on the microphone in the pulpit, and I mentioned that I grew up Baptist because in the way that I was raised, women were not supposed to even walk across that, the dais, like they were not supposed to be there. And he would just really gave me so much space. I took a lot of liberties too, but gave me so much space to say words and to be in process out loud in a lot of ways. And so I'm mentioning that in this moment because, my Southern Black Christian Baptist, upbringing with this elder Black pastor from Alabama was always thinking about Blackness and justice and freedom and politics. And that was just such a major part of my, upbringing in so many ways. And so I don't know if there was a moment, because there just was this series of moments of me being just trained and, taught and socialized into this idea of like, no, what we're looking for is freedom in two different ways, right? What Christ said, whom the Son sets free is free indeed. And so like in the pursuit of that kind of freedom, but also we are Black in these bodies, and these Black bodies. And so we're looking for that kind of freedom too. And the moment of revelation that all the Black girls are activists was really just my, sick and tired of being sick and tired moment. I don't want to keep on. I didn't mean to be doing anti-racism education. And I'm sure for those of us who are in our particular industries, who are still somehow the diversity and inclusion specialists, and, at your organization or on your job, you're not getting paid for that, but somehow that's, the additional work that you're doing. And when I realized that I accidentally was not just talking about Black women in hip hop, which is what I meant to be doing, that I was somehow talking about, I was just talking, my audience shifted. I started, like, I was looking around like, where did all these white women come from? And I did a hard pivot. A hard pivot. I was like, I didn't mean to be doing that. That's not what I meant to be doing. And at which point I realized that. I said, oh, if the Black girls don't do nothing else but just show up as ourselves, and that's it, as our whole full free selves, that is all that is that is our contribution. That's it. That is profound. If we don't sign another petition, and we will, if we don't do one more march, and we will, if we don't talk anymore about, the things that we want to see changed as far as policy, and we will, but if we don't. So yeah, there wasn't a moment. It's this series of moments that, kind of culminated in this revelation of like, oops, I did not mean to be talking about racism every single day. I meant to be figuring out how to rest. I meant to be figuring out how to breathe easy. I meant to be figuring out, what a pleasure centered life really felt like for me. That's what I meant to be doing. And so I'm hard pivoting to that. And anything that distracts me from that mission statement is the devil. I say with that straight face. It's so dramatic. The devil.
I know. I was like, ooh.
You said it seated.
Yes, you did. So, Dr. Jones Quarles, similarly, have you always seen the linkages between Black music, art, culture, and cries of revolution? Or was there a defining moment or period of time that you just could not unsee what you saw, and now you see it everywhere?
Mm. For most Black girls, I think the church or religious institutions, sacred spaces, and the just pervasive sexism and ways by which there were questions that needed to be answered that nobody wanted to even talk about, that it just became an opening space to say, wait, why am I getting some of these questions answered in poetry and literature and music and other places? And nobody wants to have this conversation around, the table or around this space that we show up every week at, right? That I think that's always been the kind of framework or the the place by which these questions that I have, that everybody's acting like this is okay, or this is acceptable, or this is a girl's or woman's place. And there are no ways to push back on that, where the first spaces and places where there was some re-reckoning with these norms and why is this normal, right? Some what Katie Cannon says, some conscientization or some norm clarification in terms of what's happening here, what's the power sources, who controls them, right? Who controls the money, and also why aren't we able to ask these hard and deep questions in these particular spaces that don't make them critical, right? Don't make it possibilities for us to talk deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So I'm looking at our time, and we are coming towards the end of our time, and I want to honor everyone's time. And I also want to thank both of you for participating, for sharing some of yourself with us, and I want to thank everyone who's online for spending some time with us. Um, but I do have one final question, if we can squeeze this in. Um, Ebony Janice, how is pursuing dreams? I think you kind of mentioned in the beginning, but I would like to kind of wrap things up.
Mm-hmm.
How is pursuing dreams radical resistance, and how can we all take part in this?
Mm-hmm. The practical way that I think about dreaming as a part of my radical resistance is I'm thinking about the fact that if I could not just be thinking about my life from resistance, what I mean by that is there's so much going on, and usually what Black women tend to do is try to find a solution for it for all of us, and so that is like oh no. FaceTime. So there is resistance, and now the solution, who I'm going to become, is the solution to that thing, to that problem. And so in my highest imagination, or in my ancestors' actual wild dream, or in my, dreaming, I'm not thinking from a place of resistance. I am going to this place in my dreaming, in my imagination, in my visioning, in my visualizations. I'm going to this place where there is, the seed itself. There is softness, there is ease, there is, the beautiful thing is already there. What Baby Shug said, the only grace you can have is the grace you can imagine. And so I'm going there to like actually imagine what it feels like for me to dream from that grace place, from that seated place. And so I intentionally think I'm paying attention to my dreaming, and I do active dreaming. Like I will think of a scenario, and then I will dream, like daydream it out, and or take it into my night, and ask the spirit to give me dream about it. The other way that may be helpful for people too, to think about dreaming as a part of our radical resistance is I go to, you know I've used Malcolm X as the example. I could go to a Malcolm X text, something that Malcolm X said, a speech, and I could be in conversation with that, and I just use my spiritual imagination, like, to extend the conversation or to respond to it. And I think about what's coming up for me in the response, like there's something sparked, and I will take that, and I'll take that somewhere else, and I'll bring that practically into this experience.
Mhm.
And or I just sit with my imagination of what Malcolm X, based on what I know about him from studying him, reading him, thinking about him, what Malcolm X would say in this moment. And I do believe that there is taking some, liberties there, but Toni Morrison talks about that when she says that, you know when she sat with her characters, that she had to trust that it was the gospel truth. Like, no, this is the truth. This is not just my imagination. My imagination, in fact, has to become the truth, because there's so much record that's lost for us, particularly Black Americans, right? There's so much record that's lost for us, that when these characters or when these people come to me, I have to believe that it's a truth. So if I decide to be in conversation with my grandmother as a venerated ancestor, I'm not playing with her. I have to trust that what she's revealed to me in that imagination, in that dream, in that prayer, is the gospel truth. There is information there, and I trust it like it is the gospel truth. And I'm about to cheat and answer a question that Dr. Melva Sampson asked in the comment section right quick. She says, "What's your wisdom to womanish Black girls on the way?" And I
Thank
just want to say, my answer is, do too much. do too much, and then if we got to scale it back along the way, scale it back, but don't do a little bit and then get grown like me and start doing too much. Do too much now. And we'll ask for forgiveness if we got to, but that for sure is like what I want all of my little cousins, my nieces, those that are coming behind me. I want them to know to do entirely too much, and we'll figure it out along the way.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Wow, this is so powerful. Again, the accolades are coming in, the congratulations. So many folks have been following not only this conversation, but your work. We're so proud. I'm so proud. I just am so excited about how well the book is doing. I'm so excited to get the covers. I'm like tearing it apart and just loving on it. I think folks have assigned it in classrooms and the conversations are being had. And we just want to celebrate all of what you've been doing and what the book has been doing, because I think it is freeing folks and life-changing and making womanism accessible. That is really, if it has saved us, then it can save so many. So I'm glad to see that work. So thank you for this conversation. Daphne is our moderator. She's our field intern. This is her last semester as our field intern, and one of her last projects as an intern. And she, I know, is fangirling all out with you, Ebony Janice, here on the line tonight, because she was like, we got to read this book. We got to have this conversation. So I'm glad that we were able to have it. So
Thank y'all for having me. Seriously, this is the other thing that when we're talking about imposter syndrome that I wanted to say is that I've said this publicly before, and I'll be quiet. There's a hierarchy of affirmation. Elder Black women saying, "Good job, baby." You can't trump it. You cannot trump that. But your peers saying, "I see you. I affirm that this is worthy." It's such you kind of can't tell me nothing, because I'm the first conversation on Canon Conversations.
You are.
It's such a huge, I'm being silly, but it's such a huge affirmation. I receive it so deeply, the love, and I just genuinely wanted to offer my deep appreciation for being able to be in conversation with the both of you about this. Thank you.
I appreciate that. One last thing. I think Issa Rae taught us this, and she says people are always talking about mentors and folks you look up to as the people who take you to the next level. But those are not the people. The people who actually take you to the next level are the people around you, in your circle, in your age group, who give you opportunities, who make it possible for you to be in contexts and rooms and spaces. So treat your friends well.
Period.
Will open doors for you. Listen. I know about it, and I hope that we are opening doors for each other. Love y'all. See y'all for the next Candid Conversation. We don't know when it's gonna be, but when the next good title come out, we'll have another one. See y'all later. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.